Welcome to a special episode of Primary Technology. I'm your host, Stephen Milbus, of course, here with Jason. How's it going, Jason?
Great.
Great. And we have a very, very special guest, Austin Mann, professional photographer. He's been doing reviews of the iPhone, I think, every year for a long time now. He's come to talk about the 4X telephoto lens, photographic styles, and his thoughts on the iPhone 17 Pro camera system. Austin Mann, thanks so much for being here.
Hey, I'm so glad to be here. Thanks, Steven.
How many years have you done iPhone camera reviews? Do you remember the first one you did?
So the first iPhone camera review I did was 2012, actually. And yeah, that's when they came out with panorama mode. I think it was the iPhone, was that the 4? Maybe the 4?
Panorama was 5, I think.
5. It was the 5. Yeah, and 5. Yeah, so iPhone 5. And I remember I was reading reviews online. I was real excited to see what people had to say about it, and especially the panorama mode. And I remember reading this review from like one of the bigger like mass media outlets, and it was like, you know, new iPhone 5. Here's how the battery life is. Here's how the screen is. Here's how the camera is. Here's how it feels in your hand. And it was like, wait, this is like a real camera. It deserves more than just like a sub bullet list on a review. Like, let's do a real camera review. And they had this picture. There was this panorama of like the office of this writer, like, you know, the 28th floor in New York City. And I'm like, that's not what they created panorama mode for. Like, I want to see what this thing can do, and I want to create art with this and see what that looks like. So at the time, I really wanted to go to Iceland, and I had a friend that needed some content that Iceland was a perfect fit for. So I pitched him. I said, hey, you know that project you're working on? What if I go over there and shoot that for you, and you pay for me and a filmmaker to go over there, and I'll capture that, deliver it, and then also we're going to do this iPhone camera review because I think it'd be really fun to shoot panoramas in Iceland with the new iPhone. And he's like, sounds great. And then I also, after that, I pitched another friend, and I said, hey, I'm going to Iceland. And he was at Engadget at the time. He was a writer. And I was like, if I do this, would you consider, you know, publishing or, you know, pointing towards the content that I create? And he's like, absolutely. So, yeah, there you go, pulling it up. And yeah, so that was the beginning of this. We you know, I waited in line for the iPhone to come out in 2012. I think I boarded a plane that day to go to Iceland. Went to Iceland for my first time. Shot the review, you know, did a lot of side-by-side comparisons, shot a bunch of panoramas, and then posted it online. And my friend Darren Murph over at Engadget posted it, got some great traction, and that was the beginning, you know, and then just kind of kept building on it every year. The next year I went to Patagonia. It was a little bit of a bigger, more involved project, had a few more brands involved that were sponsors because they had seen the traffic from the previous year. And then shortly after that one, in 2014, when the iPhone 6 was coming out and the iPhone 6 Plus, I ended up hearing from Apple PR at the time and getting to work with The Verge, but independently to go back to Iceland and test the iPhone 6 Plus. So that was kind of the beginning. And then since then, I've been able to play around with these fun new cameras every year in fun places and report back to everybody about what I've found and how the camera's gotten better. And every year, some years are bigger than others, but gosh, you look at how far we've come over the last 12 or 13 years, it's pretty crazy.
That's awesome. Well, I always go to your review first when a new iPhone comes out to see the cameras, and this year was awesome. So you went to the Dolomites in northern Italy, the Dolomite Mountains. You have the 17 Pro, and I'm going to link Austin Mann's video and review, obviously, in the show notes. But the entire video was filmed on iPhone 17 Pro, and so just incredible footage that whole time. Lux Camera, the makers of Halide, was also a sponsor of this video, which we'll get to because if we have time, I want to touch on the iPhone Air as well. But beautiful photos once again. And so obviously the telephoto camera is a huge part of the story this year. But I actually wanted to start on photographic styles because you talk a lot about that in your review. There's a new photographic style, Bright, but you also talk about how they work. And you mentioned in your video that they're semantically aware and they will actually adjust depending on what's in the frame and the photo you're taking. Can you explain that a little bit? Because we didn't get a ton of info on that in like the Apple events and even in writing. So how do you understand photographic styles to be working? And you actually said you're using those more even than Pro Raw sometimes now. So tell us about that.
Yeah. Yeah, so photographic styles, especially in the last couple of years, have really, really amplified the iPhone photography experience, I think, for everybody, or at least they offer that opportunity. I think a lot of people don't realize what they are. They kind of think, oh, hey, there's some like new filters that I can apply to my photos, but it's really a lot more complex than that. As you said, like they're semantically aware, so it's not just like a universal adjustment. You're not just like making the whole photo warmer or making the whole photo cooler or brighter. It's really the photographic styles at their core are aware of what's in your picture. So you take things like humans and skin tones and then animals and pets and foliage and mountains and sky. It's going to treat all of those things differently when you change a photographic style in that same picture. So it's extraordinarily complex what's happening under the hood to create these effects. But at the end of the day, what you're getting is photos where people generally look, you can remember going back to the early days of Instagram filters. You might throw a filter on that looks really stylized, and maybe it makes the sky look really cool, but it also makes people look like they're pale and about to die, or these like kind of one size fits all universal filters. So what this really solves for is like, hey, well, maybe we need to make adjustments that are different to the sky and to the foliage than the people. And so when you go around and you start playing, when you jump into photographic styles and you start playing with them, you start moving the slider around, you start to realize, oh wait, like it's viewing the three of us in this selfie differently, and it's adjusting the sky differently, but it's kind of creating a balance in the picture while still stylizing it. And so it's kind of unfamiliar, and there's not really a lot that's like it. It's a lot more akin to like detailed masking in Photoshop to independently adjust different components of your shot, but it's putting that extraordinary capability into the hands of anyone in a really simple UI and UX. So there's two different kinds of photographic styles. There's undertones, which are really dialed more for skin tones, and they're less dramatic stylistically. And then there's moods. And moods are more stylistic, more dramatic, and a greater departure from what the natural image that you actually saw.
Your photographic style in your review, you list under each photo which it is. Like this example, like right here, is the bright and what it did to the shadows under the hat, so you could see more of the man's face. Which one do you, because you could set a photographic style as default in the camera settings, and then you can switch in the camera app as you take photos. So I'm curious, which do you have set as default, and if you've adjusted that, and then how often are you changing that?
Yeah, so my default traditionally has been rose gold. Rose gold adds just a little bit of kind of maybe just a really subtle hint of a pinkish tone to the skin tones, and just looks kind of warm and happy and healthy. And I just really like the way that looks, especially with a lot of the pictures I take are of my wife and 3-year-old daughter, and I think it just looks really nice with them. So that's been traditionally my go-to default, but I have been playing around a lot with Bright, which Bright's the new photographic style that came out this year, and it's got some extra pop to it, a little bit of extra contrast, but still does a really good job of maintaining the accuracy and the skin tones. And then I really so that's for kind of like when I'm photographing people or group shot, and just kind of for day-to-day life with the family. And then when I'm looking to play around with something a little bit more dramatic and stylized, I find myself gravitating a lot to Stark B&W, the Stark black and white, which is the very last one on the far right. And then there's also, I really like dramatic, which is self-explanatory. It's a more dramatic style that really stylizes the sky and creates some cool tones throughout, like landscape shots and stuff. And so, yeah, in my review, you can see some examples of that.
Cool. Jason, go ahead.
Yeah, the photographic styles thing is really interesting to me because, as you were describing it, like Apple is trying to like pull back the curtain a little bit, because you're right, like for the longest time, the iPhone's main objective when it comes to the cameras is to make a good photo that most people will think is good. And what that normally meant was that it pulls down the highlights, it brings up the shadows, like it's trying to make as neutral of a photo. And Apple like first started with Pro RAW by giving you the opportunity to like just capture the raw file. Now they've added Photographic Styles, which gives you a little bit of control over it, but it's doing it in still a pretty simplistic way. Like most people would have no idea what tone mapping is, but they can slide their finger up and down on a square and make it look like what they want. But I'm actually just kind of curious, when you think about the complexity behind Photographic Styles, and when you think about the capabilities that Apple is building in for what it would sort of bill as pro photographer, I don't think of Photographic Styles as a pro photographer feature. Like I don't like it just, because if you're like, you can't shoot obviously pro raw images and still have the preview have a photographic style. And also if you shoot, like you're giving up one or the other. Who do you think the audience for like Photographic Styles really is?
Well, I think I think that everyone can gain something from it. And as a creative professional myself, I am using Photographic Styles more than anything else. In fact, I almost never use Pro RAW unless I'm shooting in really low light and long exposure situations where I really want to control the noise reduction more specifically. But it's, the advantages in my mind to Photographic Styles, and the reason I've started gravitating more that direction is, one, it's a lot less storage space, and it's just faster, it's faster capture in general. And for me, timing is really, really important in photographs, getting the perfect millisecond for a photograph. And which sometimes requires shooting a bunch of shots in succession. The camera can just capture quite a bit more quickly when you're not shooting in Pro RAW. And then also it's still flexible. Like that's you're not baking Photographic Styles into the shot when you choose it. You're able to change it before and after and whenever. So you've got a lot of latitude in that photograph still. And ultimately, there are very few scenarios, because it's super smart and it is identifying these objects in the picture as you're taking them. You just got tons of editing latitude that would otherwise could be hours in Photoshop to try to correct that same way with that same level of accuracy. For most of my use cases, more than 90%, I feel like Photographic Styles is everything that I need. And then the other 10% is more like, all right, I want to go shoot the Milky Way, and I really want to be able to control how much noise reduction is being applied, or there's probably other scenarios out there, but there aren't a whole lot that I switch over into Pro RAW anymore.
And so you were saying, I think I didn't let you get to the horizontal adjustment on Photographic Styles, but if you could touch on that. And then I don't think Photographic Styles saves that mapping. Like if you go to the bright and you adjust that photographic style in camera, and then you leave the camera and come back and it's different, I don't think it saves that, or maybe it does. But are you adjusting that on the fly? So what's the horizontal, and then are you adjusting those on the fly?
Yeah, so just back to my long-winded explanation of how the UI works. You've basically got this square, and you've got a slider that you can slide up and down and across this square. And so as you go up and down, that affects local tone mapping and kind of the HDR look. And, one of the bits of feedback over the last few years that I've heard in reviews on my comments and so on is that, this just looks too HDR. It looks too smartphone. It looks over processed and these different sentiments. And that up and down in Photographic Styles really allows you to say, well, I want it to look max processed, or I really want it to look minimally processed. And then left and right is more about saturation. So that's just like, how much color am I getting in this shot? So if you think about it that way, up and down is kind of processing, feel, and left and right is saturation. That's basically what you've got in Photographic Styles and what you can control as you drag around that square. And then what was your other question?
Are you adjusting it on the fly? Like as you're taking a photo, you frame it, and then like, are you adjusting that photographic style in the moment where you're taking the photo, or do you kind of have some set preferences that you return to depending on the landscape or subject?
Well, I don't really think there's a right answer here, but what I usually do is I have my default set up as rose gold, and then I sometimes, if I'm out creating a series, like I did a series on my recent trip over to Bhutan, which was a very long flight in a lot of airports. I shot a bunch of stark black and white, like while in transit, and so I might set my default to stark black and white while I'm doing that, but that's pretty unusual. So usually I'm just leaving it in rose gold, and then making changes later if I want to.
I got you. All right, let's talk about the telephoto lens, because that's the biggest upgrade, I think you had said in your video. And when it comes to the iPhone 17 Pro over the 16, and I think you mentioned the 4X now on the Pro. Do you prefer that over the 5X from the 16 Pro? You feel it give you a little more flexibility?
Yeah, so I feel like we've gotten these kind of different perspectives on the telephoto front on the iPhone camera over the last few years, and trying to kind of hone in on what's enough, what's too much, how fast do we need the lens to be, how long do we need the lens to be, how much stabilization do we need, all these different things. And it feels like we've really now landed somewhere that feels good in my hands. And so basically, yeah, last year we had a 5X telephoto, so 120 millimeter perspective, which was nice to have a little bit more punch than previous years, a little bit further in. But it was also just for like general day to day, like taking a picture of my daughter in my house or something. Like it was just a little too tight. Just the quarters seemed like I was just usually in quarters that were just a little too tight for 120 mil. And so this year, backing down from 5X down to 4X has felt a lot more familiar. The 100 millimeter perspective is more traditional as a portrait lens, and also going from last year's 5X was a 12 megapixel sensor. Now we're getting a 4X with a 48 megapixel image, and that's a huge step up in terms of clarity and sharpness and resolution, and having the ability to print, which is something I'm doing more than ever. And so and I love my standard go-to with my Sony A1s is I've got maybe a if I take one lens, it's a 24 to 105, and that's now covered really well with the iPhone built-in lens range. But then if I take two lenses, it's a 24 to 105 and a 1 to 400, and then if I take three lenses, it's a 14-1.8 plus the 24 to 105 plus the 100 to 400, and now we're pretty close, except for that top end. We've got the X at 100 megapixels, or sorry, the X lens at 100 millimeters at 48 megapixels, and then we've got the 8X, which is covering us up to 200 millimeter perspective. But we also have that's at the top end, and then on the wide perspective, we're looking at a 13. So we're really covering basically everything that the perspective that I usually am trying to cover when I'm carrying my A1 cameras, which is really great, and we're doing it. We have a having the high resolution sensor at the 48 or at the 48 megapixel 4X. Gosh, it's hard to keep these numbers straight for me. Having 48 megapixels for that telephoto of the 4X is really nice, because previously on the 5X having that extra punch was nice, but if you really wanted to print or crop in on those 5X telephoto shots, the resolution wasn't quite there. And now this year we have it in the iPhone 17 Pro.
Okay, so let's talk about those numbers for a second. There's a lot of them. So this is a thing that I have been experimenting with recently, because I love the 4X. I agree with you that the 100 millimeter focal length is better as sort of the long end default, right? Because most people are just, and you definitely should be doing this on a phone, but most people, even if you throw a 70 to 200, you're shooting at either 70 or 200. Most people are not fine tuning. So it's good that that's a better focal length for people, because yeah, no one was stopping at 100 millimeters when they had a 5X is what I'm trying to say.
Right.
And I think that Apple has given us a 48 megapixel sensor there, but there is still no way on your iPhone to force it to produce a 48 megapixel image, right? In fact, this morning, even using the Halide app, I just took a couple of 4X shots, and they're all 12 megapixels, even though I'm changing settings, trying to, go to most compatible to get away from the heat, but it's saving lossless JPEGs, and it's doing all these things. I feel like Apple still can't resist this temptation to make it as simple as possible, because what's happening is sometimes you try to take a 4X picture and it's like, well, actually I'm going to use the main camera and I'm just going to crop it, or I'm going to you still. I love that they have built in so many of these pro features. As someone who like has shot thousands of commercial jobs and weddings and portraits myself, I feel like they're getting so close. And then you reach the limits and you're like, but I still can't shoot exactly the way that I want. And you just talked about your opening in your gallery going to have this like collection of prints. Like, how do you feel about like this tension? It feels like Apple's like, yes, this is for pros. Also, we're still going to make it so that you can't quite do the exact thing you want. And I know that like Halide, you can get closer. Like you can get closer, but there's still something happening there where you just can't quite do exactly what you want.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the great tension of the iPhone camera, right? And I think, there's always this kind of sentiment of, pros wanting more pro and looking for that in some third-party apps, while it seems like the iPhone camera team is, clearly catering more and more to the pro, but while also having to keep a close eye on most of the users that are taking pictures with the iPhone camera, which is not pros. It's just, people wanting to take great photographs and not worrying about the settings. So I have a lot of respect for how their approach and the kind of the deeply thoughtful nature that they, or the deeply thoughtful way that they, consider that tension. And so, I always want more control and more power and all these things. And, sometimes we've gotten those things in past years and then we've realized like, oh, like there were trade-offs for this and I'd rather not have those trade-offs. And like, so there's a certain grain of, I always try to look at like, well, maybe they could have done that, but why didn't they? And maybe I've begun to have a little bit more faith that there might be a good reason that I can't get it just the way that I want it, And I think but that doesn't mean that there's still not things I would like to change and tweak and see improve and hope for in next year's model. But I think that, as you go into like camera settings, like there's so much in there now. Like if you look back at camera settings on an older iPhone, there's like 4 options or something.
Flash on or off.
Yeah.
Live mode.
It was a completely different world. So I think a lot of what we see in camera settings is, tailoring towards professionals that do want, to be able to preserve their settings. Like a pro camera doesn't reset itself every time that you set it down. And so that's what preserved settings is all about. And like, even this year being able to turn on and off, like what I actually even see in the UI, like that's stuff that I don't want to like care about seeing. That's a cool new feature that is more pro. That means, it can come a certain way, default and tailor to most users to be able to make it really easy to change settings or just keep it really clean. And you don't have to see it in the UI, but maybe I turn it on and bring it into the UI. So, there's always improvements happening, and usually you can reach to third-party apps like Halide that are, Halide's been around for a while and is still the very best of the manual camera apps for iPhone, in my opinion. And that's where I go when I want more manual control. But as you say, sometimes we're left longing for more. So we're always looking forward to what's coming next.
Well, and it makes sense because you're right. Someone shooting their kid's soccer game should not be taking 48 megapixels. Like you're just going to like eat up all of your storage. Like that's the obvious reason that Apple is saying you didn't need 48 megapixels. It's perfect sunlight, like whatever. Like I'm just going to give you the better use case for yours. But I just find this interesting. Like they keep talking about, like you said, how many they're really appealing to pros, and they really highlighted the fact. And actually, even at 12 megapixels, a 48 megapixel sensor on the telephoto is like substantially better. Like you get a better output, so that's great. I just think it's just so interesting how they're like walking this line, and I'm like, oh, I'm so excited. I'm like, I can't make it take a 48 megapixel photo. Sometimes it does. Most of the time, it's like 12 megapixels is enough for you.
That happens in low light scenarios because of like deep fusion and that stuff, but that doesn't happen to me very often. Maybe I need to go check the resolution.
Check your photos.
Check your photos.
Yeah.
Check your photos library.
I actually posted a photo on social media that I had taken with the X in Pro RAW on the 17 Pro. So I assumed it was a 48 megapixel. And then when I posted the photo, someone was like, that looks like it was taken by the main camera. How they knew that, I have no idea. But I went back into the Photos app, and sure enough, it was taken with the main 1X lens, even though I had tapped in the camera app. So yeah, I'd be curious if you go back and see some of those photos, be like, you know what, I thought I took that on the thing. But I'm curious, you also tried the iPhone Air. You said in your review you love small and thin phones, and that is the smallest and thinnest we've ever gotten. But obviously the camera for you as a professional photographer is not, you don't want to make that trade-off. I'm curious for maybe not the professional camera person or photographer, camera person, professional photographer. If someone just likes to take a lot of photos or they're taking photos of their family, do you think the new telephoto and maybe the ultra wide are still a reason to go pro, even for just like day-to-day stuff? Or do you think the iPhone Air is good enough for most people? How would you advise someone that's not a professional photographer, but does like taking good photos, and how should they use that telephoto? How did you advise them?
Yeah, I mean, I think when I first held the Air, I was like, this actually could be amazing for me. I love it. And I like being lightweight and minimal and discreet, and it kind of like ticks all of those boxes. And so I was kind of optimistic about, and I also like working with a fixed lens. I like, when I first started shooting, I just had like one prime lens, and this has got more options than that. So I was kind of optimistic that maybe I would use it. I did find, pretty quickly that I really love the ultra wide perspective. So I decided it wasn't for me. But I mean, the iPhone Air is an amazing device for a lot of people. And from a camera perspective, I think it offers most of what most people need. I think that if you're using a previous gen iPhone and you don't find yourself going to ultra wide very often, then I think I would take a really close look at the Air. And again, going back to Halide, the way that they're working with the camera on the iPhone Air, they're really tapping into some of its potential that you don't quite get in the native camera app on the iPhone, and allowing some closer focus possibilities and just a native raw capture. Yeah, if you don't find yourself using ultra wide much, then I would say take a good look at the Air. It's got a really solid everyday camera with a standard perspective, and has a lot of capabilities still. So yeah.
Do you find we talk about camera control, the button, a lot between Jason and I. I just recently started actually using it to at least launch the camera, and then I still use the on-screen shutter to like take a picture. Have you transitioned to using the camera control button both to launch camera and take photos, or do you still manage things on the screen and use that virtual shutter button?
So I've been pretty open about the fact that I'm not a big fan of camera control. I just think it's not a great UI. I find myself accidentally bumping the settings all the time, and it does not work for me. And so what I did is I turned off inaccessibility, all of the camera adjustment settings on camera control, but while still keeping it live as a button to pull up my camera and to trigger my shutter. So I use it to pull up my camera all the time. So if my phone is in my pocket, then I can reach in with my index finger and have my hand resting, or my thumb, on the camera control button on the right, and I can have my camera open and ready to shoot before it's even out of my pocket, or as it comes out of my pocket. And then when I'm ready to take the shot, I can just click the camera control again and it fires, and I never even have to touch the screen. And I can lock it with the button above it and then just put it back in my pocket, and then there's no screen touch whatsoever. So I think that there's a lot of unique powers of the iPhone camera, but one of its superpowers, one of the things it can do better than virtually every other camera, is take advantage of the spontaneous moment and stay more discreet. And so I'm always trying to lean into the strengths of whichever tool I'm using. And that's definitely one of its greatest strengths, is just the ability to, see something inspiring or see a moment and capture it and have it back in its place within 3 seconds. It's so fast. And it was fast before the camera control button, but it's even faster now. And so that's how I use the camera control button, and that's how I advise most people use it. I look over people's shoulders and I see them trying to take pictures and accidentally adjusting their exposure down or up or whatever. So I usually just tell people, hey, let's turn off the settings adjustment on there if that's causing a problem. And yeah, so I'm glad we have it. I just don't think it needs to be able to control camera settings.
Well, and Apple agrees. If you set up a brand new phone now, it's off by default. all those extra
Yeah.
settings. Like it's just a button now. Like that's the way it should be. The way you described it, Steven, were you listening? That is how you should be using camera control.
Yeah, exactly. So the new Photos app, we haven't talked since the last redesign and then the redesign. But this year,
Yeah.
How do you feel? How do you feel with the Photos app? How did you feel about it last year, and then how do you feel about it now?
September's been a really crazy month for me. I had my 40th birthday, which is actually on the day of the keynote, and then I had a big shoot in the Dolomites, and which I was testing the iPhone 17 Pro on, and then I came home for 2 days, and then I ran to Bhutan for 10 days. I was in the remote Himalaya for a long time, and I'm like just getting back from that. So basically, from the day that I set up my iPhone 17 Pro, I just played around with photos for a second, set up some things, and then I've just like been running ever since. And this is like the first week that I've like had that I'm like home and
Actually,
like taking a breath and saying like, what do I think about this now? So when I first set up photos, I like pinned a couple of different albums and I kind of like restructured it the day that I was first setting it up and reordered like what I'm seeing and all that stuff. And I like that ability. I'm still not finding it like super intuitive. You know, it was so consistent for so long. It felt kind of familiar. And I think this goes back to like, you know, something we were talking about earlier, and this is a little bit different, but like, you know, you're talking about like, well, sometimes the iPhone chooses to shoot 12 megapixels instead of 48. Like what we do know is that, you know, that for whatever reason, you know, the team that is designing the camera is saying it's going to be a better photograph if we shoot it at 12. And like that, the role of the iPhone camera is to make it the best camera it can be. And for whatever reason, they're saying because of light or whatever else, or close focus or whatever other reason, it's like, I want it to be, I thought I wanted this, but the camera is telling me this is going to be best. And so there's a little bit with the smartphone world and, you know, where it's so heavy in software, there's so many decisions that have to be made to make a great photograph. And there's a certain amount of trust that we have to be like, well, they said that this would be best. And so that's going to be, I'm going to be curious about why that is. I wish I could control it, but maybe it was better to go this way. In the same way, it's like as the Photos app has been redesigned, like I am always kind of trying to approach it as like, all right, I don't initially like really jive with this. I don't think it's like the greatest thing ever, but also maybe there's some merit to it. Like I'm sure, you know, they didn't build it this way thinking it was going to be worse. And so True. Maybe there's something to it, and maybe I can get over that hump of being like, all right, well, it's not super familiar, but like, what is the merit here? And so that's kind of my approach with a lot of the new updates. And it's not always one that pans out. Sometimes it's like, oh no, this was horrible. Like, yeah. And other times it's like, oh, eventually I came around to it and, you know, I found that I liked it better. So anyway, when I look at photos, that's kind of still my posture. I'm like, okay, well, where is this? And like, why am I like scrolling the wrong direction to get up and down in my photos?
Exactly.
And like, I was just over there and I had to scroll this way, but now I'm in this one and I have to scroll that way. It's like, there's some kind of weird and funky aspects of the UI. But I do kind of like, you know, I reordered like my media. I put media types. I like to sort my shots by media type. So I like put that up at the top so I can see like panoramas and videos and everything really quickly and easily. And then, you know, I have recent data. I have at the very top, I have pinned. So I have like my favorites, which is how I kind of cull through all of my shots. And then I have recently saved. And then I use map a lot. So I have map and then I have
your
albums.
map must be pretty wild. The map of your iPhone photos. That's awesome.
It's always fun to look at.
Were you an aperture guy back in the day?
I never really got into aperture. I've always been, I used it a little bit, but I've always been, you know, I started using Photoshop in the early 90s, 93. And then I started using Bridge when it came out. And I've got Photoshop and Bridge open right now on my computer, and I've never been a Lightroom or Aperture person. I just manage all of my photos and workflow all through the Finder, and then use Bridge to navigate.
Is that true for for stuff you take on the iPhone as well? Like, because obviously the benefit of Photographic Style is you lose once you take those photos out of the Photos app.
Yeah, so there's a little bit of like integration challenges with styles on that front, but I you know, ever since USB-C came to iPhone, I really feel like the pro digital workflow was transformed in ways that really only pros trying to use iPhone could fully feel. You know, it used to be, I think it was the 14 maybe that was the last one that had Lightning. Is that right?
Yeah, 14
I can't,
Pro, yeah.
yeah.
14 and 14.
And I remember trying to like offload like content for that review through Lightning, and it would like the phone would overheat and it would be like really slow, and we were like under the gun to get stuff out, and it was just really hard, especially from a motion workflow and from a stills. It just wasn't easy to plug it in and get the footage off and photos into your normal workflow. But now with USB-C, like what I do is I just plug in one of my SSDs straight into my iPhone and then just offload content to that SSD, just like I do my Sony or my Hasselblad or my drone. And I just have, you know, A1, A1B, X2D, Mavic 4 Pro, and then iPhone 17 Pro, and it's just its own folder. And then I can cruise through those folders with Bridge, and then I can also easily back up. You know, I've got drive A and drive B in the field, and so drive A is my primary drive, and I back up to drive B every day using ChronoSync. And then when I get home, I plug into my network attached storage, and I back up my entire like 2025 folder to my NAS using ChronoSync, and that's all just iPhone is now, because of USB-C and because of like those easy integrations. It's just a lot. You know, I could have done it earlier with iPhone, with image capture and with photos, but it was a real dance, and I never really trusted it. But now I legit trust backing up direct. Either I can plug my iPhone by USB-C into my MacBook Pro and then offload it, or I can just go direct to the drive, which I find to be the fastest.
So are you just sort of dialing them in with the Photographic Styles on the phone right after you take them, and then exporting that and then making any further changes you need to with Photoshop? Got it.
And I also like, you know, I use iCloud to sync all my iPhone photos. So there's still like, if I want to make an adjustment, I can always like, you know, I can cruise. I've got it's a little bit redundant, which I never mind a little bit of redundancy, but you know, I have it on my drive and I can cruise through that on Bridge. And then if I'm like delivering something you know, that I really want to make a tweak on, I have a couple of ways that I can do that. But the fastest way is just look for the file number in Bridge and then pop over to Photos and pull it up and then re-export it.
So now that you're done with the review, so for the rest of this year, when you go on a trip or you're taking photos, like you've mentioned, you have Hasselblads and the Sony. When do you decide to take a photo with your iPhone versus the big cameras that you have with you? Or is it like this trip is an iPhone trip, or this trip are the big camera trips? How do you decide which camera to use, including the iPhone?
Well, you know, that answer changes as the iPhone becomes even more powerful, because like there was the last few years I started especially last year when we got 48 megapixels on the ultra wide, I started using my iPhone a lot more often as my ultra wide option. So I would have, all right, I'd be shooting, let's say, with the Sony A1 and, you know, a really fast 35 mil or something. And I would, or let's say the Hasselblad, I would use a lot with the 38, the X2D Hasselblad with the 38 millimeter, and which is a pretty fast lens. But I'm like, oh man, what if I want an ultra wide? Well, instead of like packing my ultra wide Hasselblad lens, which is huge, you know, large and heavy and kind of complicates the kit. If I know I'm not going to be doing it a lot, but I just need it in a pinch, I know that my iPhone can do that really well, and that I could mix those two photographs perfectly fine, especially because the resolution's there on the ultra wide. Now this year we have resolution on the Telephoto f4x, so I feel like it can cover me on that kind of lower, that wider and that tighter end, and I can still take the Hasselblad X2D out with the 38 and know I've got a punchier 100 millimeter at 48 megapixels if it'll let me take that 100 mil at 48, and then I've also got the ultra wide at 48, and so I think that's a really great kind of way for pros to look at the iPhone camera. It's like, I don't think that anyone is, I don't get the sentiment that anyone's trying to totally replace, pro cameras. There will always be a space for that. And sometimes I just take my iPhone out if I'm going on a hike or something and I want to be really light. But for the most part, where I find the iPhone camera being most useful in my workflow as a professional is a secondary option that could either, that could fill the gaps of whatever my main kit can't do. And, the X3D doesn't shoot video either. So the iPhone is a Swiss Army knife to throw in your pocket that you already have with you anyway that can actually, really complement, something like my main camera with a wider, tighter perspective, motion, time lapse, whatever.
Yeah. Do you have a Vision Pro? Just curious.
Do I have a Vision Pro?
Yeah.
I do. Yeah.
Do you ever look at panoramas in there that you've taken on your phone?
I do. I enjoy shooting panoramas and viewing them in there. And I'm starting to create more and more content for that space and just being a little bit more thoughtful about spatial in general.
Yeah, yes. Making a photo spatial is one of the more compelling things to do in Vision Pro. And Jason and I have one. We're always trying to figure out how to use it more.
No, I use it every day. Steven asked
You
you
still
that
use it
question
every
because
day?
Steven doesn't know what to do with his
you
Vision
for
Pro.
real use it
And
every
I
day?
have told you in the past, the looking at panoramic photos that you've taken on your iPhone is maybe the best use case of the Vision
might
Pro
be.
because it's like you just feel like you're there.
Yeah, it is true.
Yeah.
It is
I
true.
mean, I shoot loads and loads and loads of panoramas. I have to be, I love panoramas. I shoot them all the time. And there's always been a problem of like how many, like where do you view all these panos? So definitely my favorite use case and, arguably one of the greatest use cases is of the Vision Pro is to view those panos. So I have over 3,000 panos that I'm looking at right here in my.
I was going to
Apple
ask.
photos, so
I was sure you wouldn't have more. You do have a lot more than me. I only have like 1,800, which is still, I think, a lot, but not 3,000.
Lightning round, a couple of those questions. We've taken a lot of your time. In your iCloud photos, do you know the total number of photos and videos? If you go, you can look on your phone. I think it's also on your Mac. But if you go to your library, well, you know what? I don't even know where to look now anymore, Jason. I know
The very
Yeah,
bottom.
it's all moved around, right? I thought it was.
If you just go to your library and scroll to the bottom, it'll tell you.
Yeah, 352,000.
That's pretty good. Photos, just photos.
Just photos, yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
I keep
All
most
right,
of my videos out of photos because of the data, but I have 24,543 videos.
Nice. All right, last
What are
lightning
you
round.
at?
Because
Oh, wait, we got to compare here.
let's see. Let me.
Mine
Jason,
is
you-
91,000, so a little less. But
91,000 photos.
But I segment out like anything I take with my like Z8. I just put into Lightroom. None of that.
Oh yeah, I don't have any. These are 100% iPhone.
Yeah.
There's
I believe
zero.
you. I'm just saying.
Yeah. I have way less. I thought I had over 100,000, but I only have like 49,000.
It's because you're not a photographer, Steven. It's fine.
I know. I used to pretend to be one. I worked for a travel company for a little while. All right, last question.
We're all
because
photographers. If we have an iPhone, we're a photographer.
Fair enough. We have a little shtick on our show about some like iPhone preferences. So two quick questions. On your iPhone, the battery in the top right corner, do you have the battery percentage on or off?
100% on.
You got to see that
Never
exact.
at 100%. It's usually less.
Okay. And
It's at 100 now.
okay. Dominant hand, do you put your left-handed or right-handed?
I'm right-handed.
What pocket do you put your phone in?
My right.
Right side pocket, right? Okay, just
Yeah.
making sure.
Is
Jason
that a
puts it
thing?
as
Does anyone
These
do
are
that
not
differently?
trick questions. We
They're
promise.
not sure.
It's just
Well, Jason puts his. Don't you put your phone in your non-dominant pocket?
yeah. Well, and the reason is that the right pocket has the little thing in it. I just scratched up too many phones that way, and I actually use
I have
my
one
phone.
right here. That last year's phone.
Yeah, most of the time I use my
Scratch.
phone with my left hand. So
Yeah. I didn't realize that the left-hand pocket doesn't have that little metal thing. Never thought about that.
You might switch. preference.
I choose pants that don't have it.
okay,
Oh, there you go.
that's the solution to this problem, Steven. We need new pants.
That's it. Austin, you've been very kind to give us your time. Tell us about Maven. You opened a gallery in Wichita, Kansas, and you might be doing some photo iPhone prints. Tell us about it.
Yeah. So, we moved back to my childhood where I grew up and actually even to my childhood home in Wichita, Kansas a few years ago. And then not long after we had our daughter, and she's now almost 3. And when we decided to stay here for the long haul, I have a lot of family here. We decided to open a gallery, and I, in the past, have been part of building some workspaces for photographers and filmmakers to work together down in Dallas and Nashville. And we were mostly like a creative studio, co-working space, but we had a gallery inside of both of those locations. And we always knew we might want to open a dedicated gallery someday. So we started looking for space around Wichita and found an awesome location that's really in our neighborhood and we really love. And decided to open the gallery called Maven, which is a combination of Esther and I's last names, mine Mann and hers Havens, and she's an amazing photographer and storyteller. And so we decided we would, use the gallery to be able to share stories of light and beauty and hope here in Wichita, things that we've seen around the world together in telling stories in different ecosystems, especially in Africa, but also telling stories of people overcoming poverty through education and clean water projects and all kinds of other initiatives. But we also wanted to champion the work of our community and of some of the most amazing artists that we've been able to intersect with over the years. And so the vision here is to show some of our work and share it, and then also to show and share the work of other photographers and artists from all over. So right now we have a show up with the artist Ruben Wu, who's also worked a lot in the iPhone photography space and beyond. And it's a two-man show with Ruben and Steve Rubel called Measures of Time. And we're going to do 2 or 3 shows a year, but this December we're opening a show that will feature some work from my iPhone photography from over the years. So we're going to do some limited edition pieces, actually similar to this one. This is a piece that's shot on iPhone that's part of our fall series called La Tom Chante. Esther took that one with her iPhone a few years back. And so, yeah, we think that having meaningful artwork in your spaces can spark conversation and dialogue, a little bit more purpose than something you might pick up at the local Target. And not only does it support artists, but it also, that unique bit of beauty can spark conversation that can create more meaningful relationships with the people around you. So our hope is to help people to collect beauty and share light and conversations in their spaces.
Well, that's awesome. Well, thanks so much, Austin Mann, for taking the time and sharing your review with us. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me.